I think for almost everyone in Israel, this is a very happy day. We've been seeing tens of thousands of Israelis flock since early this morning to Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, which has become a sort of gathering point over the past 2 years for those who have been advocating for the release of the hostages. And it was quite a sight today seeing about, like I said, 60, 70,000 people in the square and in all the surrounding streets with a big stage that kept broadcasting the images of the hostages coming out. People were chanting and clapping their hands and singing and cheering. And it was indeed a very happy day. And I think a sense of relief for a lot of Israelis here.
Galit, there was a moment in that speech when President Trump was talking to Prime Minister Netanyahu directly, and he said he had a lot of guts for knowing when to stop the fighting and for stopping the fighting when he did. Just get us up to speed here on what these last few days have been like. We had President Trump unveiling this peace plan a couple of weeks ago. The devil is in the details. Of course, we were talking about that just a few moments ago, what's going to happen here in Egypt and going forward. But just explain what President Trump was able to do, how he was able to convince Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop that assault on Gaza City that was underway.
Yeah. So we, to be very honest and transparent, I think we only know like part of the question, the answer to that question at this stage. But overall, Netanyahu has generally insisted that Israel cannot stop fighting in Gaza and cannot stop fighting Hamas until it is totally defeated, until it's completely out of power, and until all of its military capabilities are taken out. And what happened here is that Trump, I think, along, with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they managed to do a few things. On the one hand, they managed to convince Hamas by themselves through mediators that to give up all the hostages at once, at least all the living hostages, because there are still 28 dead hostages that remain in Gaza. And we understand that only about 4 of them are going to be brought back today. So that's one thing they managed to do. But in turn, what Hamas wanted was guarantees that the war will, in fact, end after that happens, and that Israel doesn't just get all the hostages back and then goes back to fighting. And, Trump has basically personally guaranteed that this will happen and that the war will end. And we've heard him say multiple times today on the way to Israel on Air Force One, when he came to the Israeli parliament, that this is the end of war and that the U.S. will make sure that's what happens. So I think these are, the two things that made a difference. The biggest sticking point moving forward will be whether Hamas agrees to disarm. Trump's 20-point plan says that that's what Hamas has to do. Hamas hasn't agreed to do that yet, and that's what Israel insists on. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But the sense is that the war, at least as we've known it in the past 2 years, has in fact come to an end. That's what it looks like today.